West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Joining me now here on set is Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. It's great to see you, Mr. Secretary. Congratulations on your Ironman. That's quite a feat. So I just want to start with the path forward here, because I think we can all breathe a sigh of relief, but we're not far. 45 days, 47 days is not long until that we could face this again. And we just heard this morning from Matt Gaetz that he wants to challenge Speaker McCarthy's speakership, which could put at risk his willingness to work with Democrats. How concerned are you about that potential threat and what it could mean for being able to negotiate with the House?
Well, not only would the fact of a shutdown have been incredibly damaging, but just having that threat and that chaos that goes with it dangling over us, not just dangling over the administration, but dangling over the American people, is not helpful. Now, we're going to keep our heads down, keep doing the work. As the president said, people expect their government to work, and that's what we do. We're focused on getting the machinery of government to work for people. I started my week last week, Monday, in Nebraska. We're working on a short line railroad called the Cornhusker. Very important for getting agricultural products to where it's going. Yes, it's perfect for Nebraska. We're bringing $15 million there to help improve supply chains and safety on the railroad. Tuesday, I was at Denver International Airport working, highlighting the work that's going on there to rearrange a taxiway that'll prevent those runway incursions that we've been hearing about. So this is the kind of work that we all got into this line of public service to do. But as the week mounted, we had to devote more and more of our time to preparing for the possibility of a shutdown. And that's time we'll never get back. That's time the American people will never get back. For people who plead fiscal conservatism, the waste that is created by this fountain of chaos that is today's House Republican conference really does have a huge cost, even when they don't get their way. If they had gotten their way, it would have been that much more damaging to transportation systems, to the economy, and to all of the services Americans count on.
Now, when we're in this situation, in all likelihood, in 6 weeks, we're right before the Thanksgiving holidays, the Christmas holidays, or whatever holidays people may celebrate. What is the risk a potential shutdown or a shutdown at that time could pose to air travel?
As you might imagine, I see this largely in terms of transportation. And this year, we've seen some of the heaviest air travel numbers ever recorded. Summer, TSA screened more passengers than any time in American history. So American travelers are back in the air, which means more than ever, we need that TSA support. We need that air traffic control support. And the idea that you're going to stop paying air traffic controllers, that you're going to shut down the Air Traffic Control Academy that is racing to get new staff on board, which is not a simple process. You would do that right in time for the holidays is madness. There is no such thing as a good time for a shutdown.
That's the worst.
But it's a particularly bad time. And it even goes to some of the infrastructure projects. We're working on a project at Dallas, Love Field there, upgrading the instrument landing system. That work would halt. The whole goal has been to get that project done in time for the Thanksgiving holiday. This could stop it in its tracks. And nobody wants this. At least nobody out in the real world wants this. So we really need the House Republicans to, first of all, come to terms with each other. They seem to have trouble sorting out their differences internally. and then work with us, as, by the way, it happened yesterday, right, where the Democrats who were ready to work the whole time with them provided the votes to make sure that we avoided this shutdown, kept the government running. But we can't just lurch from threat to threat, potential shutdown to potential shutdown. Sooner or later, this drama has to end.
It's very destabilizing for everyone. Since you're here, I did, and you are a military veteran, I have to ask you about your reaction to former President Trump's recent comments implying that former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Mark Milley, should be executed. It's crazy every time I say that out loud. My colleague Von Hilliard caught up with him on Friday and asked him about it. So let's listen to that, and then I'm going to talk to you about it on the other side.
Well, General Milley, what he did is really treasonous. If you look at what he said to China, he's either stupid or it's treason.
But why suggest
there are
death?
many people that would call it treason.
But why suggest death?
Thank you very much.
It's alarming, not surprising, but given you've served and you're a longtime public servant, what is your reaction to that?
The level of disrespect for the American military, not to mention for the general, is both shocking and not shocking. I mean, look, this is part of a lifelong pattern with the former president that I would argue was first displayed when he faked a disability in order to avoid having to go to Vietnam and allowed, I assume, some working class person to go in his place, and has continued ever since. Made a name for himself by basically saying that he did not respect John McCain because he was a war hero. Look, a lot of this obviously is to get attention, and you hesitate to reward that. On the other hand, we do in fact still have some boundaries that matter in this country. And one of them is that our regard for the military and our respect for the military is nonpartisan, it's non-political, and it's universal. And that is especially important because that's part of how the military does their job. I knew every time I put on that uniform, every time I went to work, every time I got into a vehicle, every time I went outside the wire, that I was with men and women who were serving and supporting each other and responsive to a chain of command that was not about politics, that did not break down because of our political differences. This undermines that. It threatens that. And it threatens it at a time when we need those institutions that are still at least somewhat outside of the chaos that the last administration sowed and that some extreme House Republicans are sowing as we speak. We need what the military has to offer by way of nonpartisan stability more than ever. And I would say General Milley's been a class act in how he's dealt with it. You've also run for president. You've been a very public figure for several years now, and you've been the subject of threats yourself. Trump also mocked Nancy Pelosi's husband being attacked at his home by a man with a hammer. And I just wanted to ask you, having experienced this before, how concerned you are about that and this kind of continued stoking of violence and kind of echoing of it by the former president. One of the marks of whether a country is a free and democratic and open society is that there is no political violence. And to have this level of, whether it's joking about it, stoking it, or actually perpetrating it, which happened a few blocks from where we're sitting on January 6th, that is an extreme concern, I think, for anybody who cares about the trajectory of the United States, not to mention anyone who is personally impacted by that. There is enough that public servants and people who go to work in this administration or in Congress have to worry about, let alone their families. Okay, it's one thing for people who choose to go into public service, although again, if you're going into civilian public service, the last thing you should have to worry about is a threat to your safety. But their family, their spouses, children, surely one thing we should all be able to agree on is that they are absolutely off limits to these kinds of threats.
It is Monday, the 2nd of October of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, River City Hash Mondays. That's right, folks, it is Monday. And why is it River City Hash Mondays? Well, traditionally, one takes what is left over from the weekend and reconstitute it, yeah, that's a term from way back, into a lovely gourmet delight for your gourmet delight on this fabulous Monday. Yeah, okay. Some hash has like shredded potatoes in it. Okay? Some. Just letting you know. Okay, so Trump was gone to court for, I guess, finding out how much of his wealth is going to be extracted from him. I hope they take it all. I hope he goes to jail a pauper. Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, got to borrow some money to get something from the commissary. I'd like to see that. But no one's going to lend it to him because they know what a scofflaw this guy is. He never pays his debts. And then he tries to sue so that he only has to pay 50 cents on the dollar, if that. This is what cracks me up about Donald Trump. And the people that think that he is Superman. Yeah, some MAGA supporter, a lady, said that when he came down the escalator, it was like watching Superman come down. And I'm like, Lex Luthor is like Superman to these people? Jesus. Because Donald Trump is not an unknown commodity. And I put the commodity part in there on purpose because he's a brand. And has been for quite some time. When he failed at being able to build things, then he got into the branding business. And then called everything his buildings. Anyway, we knew who this guy was. Even before he had Art of the Deal ghost written for him. Jeez. I remember friends reading Art of the Deal and thinking, this is the way to be. I'm all, if you want to go to jail. I just couldn't believe it. Look, propping up this guy as some sort of, successful businessman when he was anything but. One lawsuit after another. Known to pal around with mobsters. Jeez, I mean, he had Roy Cohn on retainer. Give me a break. So is it willful ignorance or is it just complete ignorance? I think it's a combination of both. At least on that movement. And what segment of our American society, would be, prone to being manipulated into believing even more lies? Yeah, we know. Okay, well, is he going to get his comeuppance? Does he get to rail against all of our most cherished institutions and practices? Mm-hmm. He will. Because, loyalty and public service is for little people. I mean, we all speculated. No, it was more than speculation. Okay? The only reason this guy ran for office to begin with is that he thought it would keep him out of jail. Because the shit was coming down. Everybody forgets what was happening in 2016. This guy couldn't get any deals going. Vlad was holding out the promise of being able to build a Trump Tower. Or not build one, but identify one and slap his name on it. In Moscow. Call it the Moscow Trump Tower. Held out that promise. And then, but you got to do a few things for me. Jeez. I mean, if you're going to have a mob president of America, at least have a competent one. One who doesn't, roll over to another mobster. Jeez. What kind of godfather is that? Oh, my God. All right. So we got that going for us, which is not nice. And I hope, I really do, send him to jail as a pauper. Well, prison. Jail's for little people. Okay. All right. Well, let us give you a rundown of what we have in store for you, because we're going to get right into the meat of this salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And as we begin here in the Bistro Cafe, well, at the top, yes, Trump has shown a lifelong pattern of disrespect for everything that we cherish in America. And I mean everything. He panders to things, but he doesn't respect them. He disrespects them completely. And, well, his behavior every day, all day, proves it, doesn't it? Yes, it does. Okay, on the rest of the menu, this one really gets into my craw. A grant program for black women entrepreneurs has been blocked by the Atlanta-based 11th Circuit Court of Appeals because it discriminates against rich white men. They're not getting the grants. It's race-based. Oh, F you. Jesus. The attorneys for the New College of Florida, the traditionally public liberal arts academy confiscated by the state in a right-wing takeover, are suing former faculty and students after they formed an alternative online institute offering all the woke curriculum DeSantis is trying to get rid of. Yeah. Autocrats got autocrat, huh? Yeah, they do. And an Oklahoma Democratic candidate's office was ransacked after his impressive debate performance. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the European Parliament president backs the UN, naming an envoy to help restart the Cyprus peace talks. And police wrestled with justices of Guatemala's top electoral tribunal as prosecutors sought to seize the tally sheets of votes from the August presidential elections. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link. The chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who does a lot more here at Netroots Radio than just monitor the chat room, and we thank Kelly for doing everything that she does. If you out there in radio listening land would take a gander across the page to the left and down just a skosh, you'll notice the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, thus becoming a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really does help us pay our bills and the other costs associated with running this powerhouse of resistance. And we thank those of you who have been so generous over these many years in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended. And we also thank those of you who might consider being so generous, hopefully in the near future, because the bills and the cost of running this powerhouse of resistance, those bills never go down. They always go up. And so we could use your help, and we thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, etc., you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those and a lot more as well. Thank you, Tom. If you would like to follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, I don't know, Instagram, Tumblr, Facebook, yeah, all of them, you can do so either at Justice Putnam or just simply as Justice Putnam, depending. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos 10 minutes before showtime. And you can access all the links and articles that we draw such great inspiration from by going to my social media feeds, because the links are readily available there to the Daily Kos diaries, and then you can read those actual articles yourself. So there. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, really wherever podcasts can be found. You just can't find them on Stitcher anymore. Okay? And I'll just leave it at that, because you never know what might happen in the future, okay, as we distribute ourselves far and wide. Yeah. Alrighty. Let us now, I know that's cryptic, but it's meant to be. Let us now tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. And it is out of the Associated Press by Alexandra Olson. A grant program for businesses run by black women was temporarily blocked by a federal appeals court in a case epitomizing the escalating battle over corporate diversity policies. Really, is that what it is now? The 2-1 decision by the Atlanta-based 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals temporarily prevents the Fearless Fund from running the Strivers Grant Contest, which awards $20,000 to businesses that are at least 51% owned by black women, among other requirements. In a statement yesterday, Sunday, the Atlanta-based Fearless Fund said it would comply with the order but remain confident of ultimately prevailing in the lawsuit. The case was brought by the American Alliance for Equal Rights, a group run by conservative activist Edward Blum, who argues that the fund violates a section of the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which prohibits racial discrimination in contracts. The Civil Rights Act of 1866, okay? Keep that date in mind, because it is during the time of Reconstruction, and watch how they've turned it on its head, because this is what they do. Let us continue. We strongly disagree with the decision and remain resolute in our mission and commitment to address the unacceptable disparities that exist for black women and other women of color in the venture capital space, the Fearless Fund said. The order, issued on Saturday, reversed a ruling issued on Tuesday by U.S. District Judge Thomas W. Thrash, which denied the American Alliance's request to halt the program. The majority on the 3-judge panel wrote that the Fearless Fund's program is racially exclusionary and that Blum's group is likely to prevail. Now, let me point one thing out. Okay? White people are not a protected class, even though they're trying to tell everybody they are. You cannot be racist against a protected or against a class that is not protected. I know they want to be part of it. Oh, everybody hates white people. We're being so put upon. The members of the American Alliance for Equal Rights are gratified that the 11th Circuit has recognized the likelihood that the Fearless Strivers Grant Contest is illegal, Bloom said in a statement. We look forward to the final resolution of this lawsuit. In his dissent, Judge Charles R. Wilson said it was, quote, a perversion of congressional intent to use the 1866 Act against the Fearless Funds program, given that the Reconstruction-era law was intended to protect black people from economic exclusion. Wilson said the lawsuit was unlikely to succeed. The case has become a test case as the battle over racial considerations shifts to the workplace following the U.S. Supreme Court's June ruling ending affirmative action in college admissions. The grant contest is among several programs run by the Fearless Fund, which was established to bridge the gap in funding access for black female entrepreneurs who receive less than 1% of venture capital funding. To be eligible for the grants, a business must be at least 51% owned by a black woman, among other qualifications. The Fearless Fund has enlisted prominent civil rights lawyers, including Ben Crump, to defend against the lawsuit. The attorneys have argued that the grants are not contracts, but donations protected by the First Amendment. In its majority opinion, the appellate panel disagreed, writing that the First Amendment does not give the defendants the right to exclude persons from a contractual regime based on their race. Weekend staff at the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Ash Mondays. Attorneys for New College of Florida, the traditionally progressive public liberal arts college that was taken over by allies of Governor Ron DeSantis as part of his war on woke, last week threatened to sue a group of former faculty members and students who have formed an alternative online institute named Alt New College after departing the school following the takeover. Alt New College says on its website that it was created to teach free and subsidized courses and to preserve the original educational philosophy of the school following the hostile takeover of New College of Florida earlier this year. Over time, we hope to build an online institute that helps protect other communities facing similar attacks, the Alt New College website said. What is happening at New College of Florida is part of a national strategy to overtake public education and subvert a fundamental pillar of democracy. Among those backing the effort are former New College provosts, Bard College in New York, and Pan America, a free expression advocacy group. But attorneys for Sarasota, Florida-based New College said in a letter last Thursday that the online institute may be violating the school's trademark and is likely to cause confusion. The attorneys demanded the Alt New College stop using the New College name. These actions have caused and will cause damage and irreparable harm to New College. Well, wait a second. It's already happened by you guys taking it over for your Nazi indoctrination. New College has become a focal point of a campaign by DeSantis, a candidate for 2024 Republican presidential nomination. That's a laugh. To rid higher education in the state of what he calls left-leaning woke indoctrination on campuses. You know, teaching the Bill of Rights, for instance. That's woke. It's leftist. New trustees allied with DeSantis fired the school's president in favor of former State House Speaker Richard Corcoran as interim president and scrapped the college's small Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. The trustees also have denied tenure to 5 professors, despite criticism that such a move poses a threat to academic freedom. Well, that's a feature, not a bug. More than a third of the school's faculty members have left following the change, and scores of students also have transferred. The conservative takeover has gained national attention, prompting a visit in April by Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom of California, in which he sharply criticized DeSantis and the changes underway at New College. Sarah K. Burris of Raw Story brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Oklahoma Democrat Larry Bush is running for the state Senate, but after a debate hosted by Lawton ABC affiliate KSWO, the former University of Oklahoma defensive back had a break-in at his office. Bush, who shares his campaign office with his insurance agency, had the glass door broken, papers sifted through and strewn about. Photos given to Raw Story by the campaign shows cash sitting on the floor and computers still on the desk. The campaign said nothing of value was stolen. As a former OU defensive back, I've taken and delivered harder shots than this, but it is certainly disturbing that some extremists will go to such great lengths to try and intimidate people in order to seize and hold on to power, Bush said in a release. To the small and petty people who perform this act, be very aware that I won't be intimidated, because protecting education and removing corruption is more important than a few broken windows and damaged furniture. The campaign explained that the incident happened immediately following a televised debate, leading Bush to believe it was politically motivated. Our community is better than this, and I trust law enforcement will bring the perpetrators to justice, he said. Bush's insurance agency has been open for over 20 years and never had a break-in prior. Our caucus condemns these acts of extremism and calls on our Republican colleagues to do the same, said Senator Julia Kurt, a Democrat from Oklahoma City. Well, I wouldn't expect any Republicans to condemn that act. That's part of their MO now. Okay, let us now go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, she's back. The Nun 2 is a straightforward sequel to 2018's The Nun. Set in the same universe as The Conjuring, Tassia Farmiga reprises her role as the demon-fighting Sister Irene. Set 5 years after the events of the first movie, Sister Irene learns that the demon nun was not destroyed, but has changed locales. Now she's wreaking havoc upon a French boarding school, and it appears that no one can stop the mayhem except her. Setting off to France to battle the demon, Sister Irene is joined by a plucky American novice nun, Deborah, played nicely by Euphoria's Storm Reed. Reed proves to be a welcome addition to the franchise, and indeed the best parts of the movies are the scenes with her and Farmiga. The pair have great chemistry and do well with the material they are given. However, even they can't compensate for the film's greatest flaw, which is that despite being a horror movie, it has some extended slow stretches. There are also a few plot threads, one of which involves school bullying, that could have proved interesting had they been developed. Though there are some suitably gruesome deaths, this is one of the few horror movies in recent memory where a higher body count might have actually helped. Still, The Nun 2 is fine Halloween fare. Despite the less than great CGI on the demon, the production is pretty good and there are a few solid jump tricks. Add to that the aforementioned performances by Farmiga and Reed, and The Nun 2 isn't that bad. Like all the films in the Conjuring world, the goal of this second prequel isn't high art. Given some of the other franchise horror out there, this one holds its own, though you might be able to hold out for cable play in 6 months. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and beat us back on our channel on YouTube.
So I'm sitting inside this stone clock tower in the small town of Castellar Lagusello in Italy. It's pretty old, like 800 years old. I had found a nook in this tower where I could sit and record this ethereal music coming from the speaker in front of me. And through the slit of a window behind me, I could watch Italians mill about below.
So, Timmy, why are you being a recluse in this tower instead of talking with people on the ground?
Well, it's a fair question. I was gathering tape to be played on this podcast, but it was also my last day at the universe in all senses. It's an astronomy festival, and I was pooped. For 3 days, I ran around this tiny, picturesque town capturing what was likely the first multi-sensory astronomy festival ever. Oh yeah, does this sound familiar?
Yes, that's Matt Russo's TRAPPIST-1 sonification that we listened to in the first episode.
Yeah. The festival organizers rigged up the clock tower to play a bunch of sonifications on a loop, and then at night, they'd project visualizations of these compositions onto the face of the clock tower.
You're listening to Scientific American's Science Quickly. I'm Jason Drakeford.
And I'm Timmy Broderick. In the prior episode of this 3-part fascination, we dove into the origins of turning space data into sound. In this final episode, we're traveling to Italy to see whether astronomical sonifications can help people with disabilities better understand the awe and wonder of the cosmos.
Okay, so I'm walking around. 4,000 people at once is a lot.
Okay, so how did you hear about this festival?
In January, I wrote a story about this burgeoning movement in astronomy. One of my sources for that story was Anita Zanella. She's an Italian astronomer who grew up playing with her relatives on the stone streets of Castellaro Lagusella. She told me about the festival.
Castellaro has a lot of historical buildings. The villa and the lake are a typical one. The other important point for this little village is the tower, which is really the key part of the heart of the village.
Castellaro has been holding an astronomy festival for a couple of years now. But this is the first time it's really been multisensory. Every workshop, every talk, every event, all of them were available in at least 2 senses.
Inclusion is the main focus this year. So being able to share the knowledge and the beauty of astronomy and the beauty of the universe with whoever, irrespective of disability and sensory limitations.
They also had these giant QR code signs set up around the festival to help blind people navigate and understand a workshop or exhibit. It's pretty wild. My phone picked up the code from 10 feet away.
Whoa, this is so cool.
Yeah. The highlight of the first evening was the keynote panel with Anita and 2 visually impaired astronomers, Nick Bond and Enrique Perez Montero. You probably remember Enrique from our last episode, but the 3 of them discussed how to build a multi-sensory discovery of the sky above us. After the discussion, I talked with Claudia Beschi. She's 25, hails from nearby Mantova, wants to be a translator, and just completed graduate school. She found the discussion fascinating. She's also been blind since birth.
I didn't think it was possible to translate galaxies into sounds. I felt like nature was talking to me. I believe that nature has its own sounds, and listening to that sound, it was as if that galaxy was telling something to me. Like this galaxy was describing itself to me.
Wow. The galaxy was speaking to her. This is wild.
Yeah, I was actually really moved by that conversation, and it stuck with me throughout the festival. And so the next day was the first full day. There was a lot going on. We had a bunch of workshops happening. We had a radio wave scavenger hunt. We had comet smelling. There was crafting galaxies out of felt and other fabrics. And also, last but definitely not least, banging pots and pans to represent stellar energies. All of the workshops were staffed by local kids who could teach the attendees, and especially the young kids who came. Elisa Zaltieri goes to high school in Mantova, and she ran the Pots and Pans station.
Yeah, it's an activity about how stars are actually different. We make child play pots, actually.
So what are you going to have these kids do?
We have to make them recognize how stars are different, and then we have to make them play like if they were stars. We were trying to explain them that the biggest star play the hardest and the smallest play lower, actually, because they are less energy.
So if you play really loudly, you'll have more energy. If you play really softly, you'll have less energy.
Yep. Adesso provo a suonare fortissimo, come questa.
While the festival was ostensibly for kids, there were many workshops and events for adults.
I'm Mattia, 33, and I'm from Verona, quite close by.
Mattia came to the festival for a couple of reasons. He knows one of the organizers, but he is also passionate about astronomy. He's a hardcore Trekkie as well. I met him at one of the workshops. He was creating a kind of patch made from different fabric textures. It was supposed to represent different parts of a galaxy.
Well, it's smooth and kind of wavy. It's not really, soft, but not really smooth. Kind of like the music we listened to before. It was a piece played on the piano. It was, a soft piece, but also, of course, played with the piano. It also had kind of a certain rhythm to it. So these little waves, at least to me, they represent this softness, but also this movement.
Mattia has been visually impaired since birth. His version of space is definitely not the inky black expanse that you or I perceive it as.
I know the stars are classified like yellow dwarfs, red giants, and in my head I imagine them quite with vivid colors, but I have no idea if they're like basically white with a slight shade of yellow or red or whatever, or if they're as vivid as I imagine them.
So what did you think? Was the festival successful?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure. It was definitely fun. Like, everyone I saw was having a great time and really engaged with astronomy. But I didn't really see many people using those giant QR codes. I know that there was bus trouble that kept many local blind and partially sighted people from coming to Castellaro.
Were there a lot of visually impaired people there?
I don't know how many of the 4,000 attendees were blind or visually impaired. Neither do the festival organizers. That's just unknowable. What I do know is that for the blind people I talked with, for Claudia, for Mattia, the festival and the sonifications were really helpful. Claudia was there for one night, but she was thrilled by what she heard.
I don't know if I see the world in a different way in the future, but I'm sure that this experience, in a way, told something positive to me, because I love nature. I think that nature speaks to us in every way possible, and these translations into sound and into tactile mode is a really good way to get in touch with nature, especially for us, because we can't see how nature is really made of.
Science Quickly is produced by Jeff Delvicio, Talika Bose, Kelso Harper, and Corinne Leon. Our theme music is composed by Dominic Smith. Matt Russo provided the sonifications you heard in this episode.
And don't forget to subscribe to Science Quickly wherever you get your podcasts. For more in-depth science and news features, go to scientificamerican.com. And if you like the show, give us a rating or review.
For Scientific American's Science Quickly, I'm Timmy Broderick.
And I'm Jason Drakeford. See you next time.
We're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
A demographic time bomb is about to go off in our state prisons. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Decades in prison accelerate aging, both physically and cognitively. In prison, 55 is old. And by 2030, 1/3 of the country's state prison population will be 55 or older, because the number of people serving life without parole has increased dramatically. And the 55 and older population has huge medical needs that are very expensive. Pennsylvania, for example, spends over $122 million per year for medical treatment for people over 50 serving life without parole sentences. All to keep locked up people who, for example, at age 60, are not the same person who was locked up when they were 20. They aged out of crime long ago. And, in addition, many are terminally ill and incapacitated, suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's, and with their advancing decrepitude, pose no public safety risk. For those behind bars close to death, states have some version of compassionate release, but many of those people simply are unable to file a petition, and others will die while the bureaucracy pushes papers. As a recent Boston Globe editorial headline put it, the graying of the state's prison cries out for a dose of compassion. And, may we add, common decency and common sense. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1935. That was the year that San Diego hosted the California Pacific International Exposition, where President Franklin Delano Roosevelt spoke the most memorable words about the rights of workers to organize. The goal of the exposition was to showcase San Diego and to boost the local economy, which had fallen on hard times during the Great Depression. The exposition was held in Balboa Park. Exhibits included history, science, industry, and culture. To prepare for the expo, improvements were made to the park paid for by the Works Progress Administration. The WPA was a New Deal era program designed to put people back to work on public infrastructure projects. The expo kicked off in May and ran for 377 days with a break during the winter months. More than 7 million people visited the park for the expo. 2 of those visitors was President Roosevelt and his wife Eleanor. As part of his trip, the president gave a speech to 60,000 people at Balboa Stadium. Earlier that year, the president had signed the Wagner Act, otherwise known as the National Labor Relations Act, which guaranteed private sector workers the right to join and form a union. The president spent part of his expo speech celebrating that achievement. He declared, quote, "A changing civilization has raised new problems with respect to the relationship between the employer and the employed. It is now beyond partisan controversy that it is a fundamental individual right of a worker to associate himself with other workers and to bargain collectively with his employer." President Roosevelt went on to acknowledge, quote, "New laws in themselves do not bring a millennium. The passage of the law helped to launch a new wave of union organizing across U.S. industry."
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, because there's lots more of us where we come from. Where it is currently 40 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the mid-60s, so a little cooler than yesterday. Cloudy skies currently with a few showers later on this morning through the afternoon. Winds light and variable, and then cloudy with occasional rain showers overnight. Lows near the mid-50s, so a little bit warmer overnight. Winds will remain light and variable. Rain is expecting to bring a little less than a quarter inch of rain, so we're looking forward to that. Hope it happens. Cloudy early tomorrow with partial sunshine expected later. Highs in the low 70s, and winds will be light and variable. And it looks like we might have a little bit of a drying out period with a smattering, hopefully, a smattering of rain. And then looks like we have a forecast of quite a bit of rain at the end of the weekend, so we'll see how that progresses. Ragweed pollen is rated moderate here in our little village of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 18 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is in the moderate range, but it has ticked down another level to level 4. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.16 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 68 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 82 and sunny. Rome is 82 and fair. Kabul is 60 degrees and clear. Kyiv is 60 degrees and fair. Hong Kong is 83 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 70 and partly cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 75 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 55 and partly cloudy. Chicago, Illinois is 76 degrees and sunny. And New York, New York is 72 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Weekend staff at the Associated Press World Desk brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. The President of the European Parliament said yesterday, Sunday, she has conveyed the legislative body's support for the appointment of a United Nations envoy to evaluate the chances of resuming stalemated talks to reunify ethnically divided Cyprus. Roberta Metsola said she personally communicated the position of the European Union's legislature to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in New York last month. Metsola said she told Guterres that Europe would never be complete as long as Cyprus remains divided. This is not just a Cyprus question, but it is a European question, she said, after talks with the island's nation, Nikos Christodoulidis. Metsola also attended a military parade on Sunday to mark the 63rd anniversary of Cyprus's independence from British colonial rule. Christodoulidis said told reporters yesterday, Sunday, that consultations continue on the appointment of a UN envoy. He has made resuming reunification talks with breakaway Turkish Cypriots a focal point of his Greek Cypriot administration. The talks have been in deep freeze since the last attempt at a peace deal ended in the summer of 2017. Prior to that, numerous rounds of UN-facilitated negotiations also had ended in failure. Reunification efforts began in the years immediately following a 1974 Turkish invasion that was precipitated by a coup aiming at union with Greece. Cyprus joined the EU in 2004, but only the southern part, where internationally recognized government is seated, and it enjoys full membership benefits. The island's division has been a regular source of tensions in the eastern Mediterranean, particularly over Turkey's claim to much of Cyprus's offshore economic zone, where sizable gas deposits have been discovered.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Even more staff at the Weekend World Desk at the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Policemen shoved and wrestled with justices of Guatemala's top electoral tribunal on Saturday as prosecutors sought to seize the tally sheets of votes from the August presidential elections. There were harrowing scenes of justices holding tight to boxes as police tried to wrestle them away as part of raids to investigate spurious claims of voting fraud. It's like a pandemic, isn't it? Around the world. Observers at the time said they saw no evidence of any such fraud, and most in Guatemala see it as an attempt to weaken or disqualify the winning candidate, Bernardo Arevalo. 70-year-old Justice Maynor Franco, wearing a suit and tie, refused to give up his grip on a vote box, even as a much younger agent tried to wrestle it away. Justice Blanca Alfaro pleaded with officers not to take the boxes because they represented the will of the voters. She was shoved and briefly fell to the floor during the fracas. Saturday's events came during the last round of raids by Attorney General Consuelo Porras and prosecutor Rafael Curuchiche, efforts that international groups have said are aimed at overturning or tarnishing the electoral results. Porras took over as Attorney General in 2018 and in 2021 was sanctioned by the U.S. government for being an undemocratic actor and undermining investigations into corruption. She has denied any wrongdoing. Porras's office has ongoing investigations into the way Arevalo's Seed movement gathered the necessary signatures for its registration years earlier, as well as into allegations of fraud in the election that independent observers have said are unsubstantiated. And that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here In West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tombe, nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tombe, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.